Welcome to Crushgasm, the podcast dedicated to the highs and lows of crushes. From their first to their worst, we're going to cover them all with a cascade of characters, including our guest today, someone that just screams my so-called life, Dustin Holden, a former caregiver, current writer and podcaster, and forever TV addict who's here to talk not only about his show, the Rewatch Recap, but also his TV character crush on the man who walks so Edward Cullen could sparkle, Barnabas Collins, from the 1991 miniseries Dark Shadows. Dustin, how are you?
I'm great. I was not expecting that full intro. I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm fantastic. I'm good. I'm full, so I'm happy. You know how that goes. So before we start, can you tell people where they can find you and the Rewatch Recap online?
Yeah, you can find it pretty much everywhere. I think I put it everywhere where podcasts are played. I'm not on YouTube with it. That's the only place that's not really there yet because it requires a lot to do that video making for that. But everywhere podcasts are played, it's I go through a season of a television series with a guest host, and we do every episode, and then we start another show. And right now, we're doing and for March, we're doing a TV movie month where it's all like, Lifetime type movies, but the original ones from like the early 90s or the late 80s, that kind of stuff. So it's really fun recapping everything and just making fun of it and adding commentary.
I bet, especially those kinds of movies. And from like back in the day. I mean, they're still crazy. Lifetime, other than they really leaned into the holiday movies, but I mean, those ones from the 90s where it was always like the man, you definitely know the man's going to be in the bad side of things, like, so good.
Yeah, or it's a jilted lover or something, something happens.
And very overdramatic too, Lifetime.
Oh yeah, totally. But it's all stuff that like before it went to Lifetime, it's basically like all the network TV movies that Lifetime ended up buying, which basically set the, course of how they were going to do things from then on. So
you're doing that now, but you kicked off the show with the Scream TV series. So I have to assume that even back in the early 90s, you were like 4th, 5th grade, you were sort of maybe leaning into this more spookier alternative entertainment. Is that why you like initially tuned into Dark Shadows? Because I don't know, it's not something I feel like maybe kids would have been into, this like macabre soap opera.
Yeah, I guess so, because this was before Goosebumps, and I was like one of the first kids around, especially in my class, to have Goosebumps books. I have like the original books. So and that launched in like 92, so this was 91, and wow, yeah, I was it was actually this I want to say the first half of 91, and that's when it came on. It's like a mid-season show, and I was in 4th grade, and I don't know, like I liked fantasy, and I liked, I started watching a few more grown-up shows. I was watching more nighttime TV because my parents had it on, and I think I saw a trailer for it, or or promo or whatever, and it really just kind of drew me in. I don't know what it was. It just seemed like, ooh, and I decided to watch it, and it was gothic, and it was very soapy, but and very spooky, and it's basically the precursor to what Passions became.
Oh,
remember that old soap opera?
Very well.
Yeah, all supernatural and silly and whatnot. It was fun. But so Dark Shadows actually came out in 1966 as an actual soap opera, and it was meant to be just this kind of dark gothic thing, and it was just but it just wasn't launching very well. And then they brought in this supernatural element, like the little boy's mother comes back for him, and she turns out to be a phoenix, and then she wants to burn him because they can re-rise, be born again and rise again, and then they're like, oh, that got some people's attention. Then they added in Barnabas Collins, who you find out over a course of several weeks is a vampire, and he's actually their ancestor because they own this town, and the Collins family, or they made the town. They don't own it, but they own a lot of like things in the town. And so they're very prominent, and he's like at the start of that when they colonized that area. And so he knows all the history and whatnot, and that like really it takes with the family, and they invite him in, basically, so to speak. So I have no idea where I just went off into that whole tangent.
Sounds very maybe like Dynasty had a baby with like the Addams family.
Yeah, a little bit, yeah.
So you're around like 10 years old when that happened, and by that age I feel like we've had like a dozen or so crushes, both like on fictional people and people in our classes. But what about you? Is like Barnabas the first crush you had? Because sometimes there are people that bloom a little later with their crushes.
Yeah, that's the first one I can really recall. Like the first, I mean, I had like a forced crush because I was a boy and I was supposed to like girls. That's how it was back then. And so I had a forced crush because all my friends had a crush on somebody. And so I had to say, oh, I like Stephanie from Full House. And I did not. No offense to her, but
Uncle Jesse, let's be real.
No, I it was really funny. I just didn't look at anybody for the longest time, and this was really the first time I really started. And it wasn't like a crush. It was like more of a I want him to protect me. I want him, to be in my life, and I am his kind of thing. It wasn't like, you know what I mean? Like there was no sexual thing about it. There was no kissing about it. It was more about, just the closeness, I guess you could say. And because obviously I just didn't think that way at that time. But yeah, I would imagine he was in class with me. I was still kind of doing the imaginary friend thing. I was a little old for it, but I was lonely. I didn't have a lot of friends. And so I was like, I just imagine he would sit there in class with me. I'm like, he couldn't be here. It's daytime. And, that kind of stuff. I was always kind of just so enthralled by the idea of Barnabas Collins and his backstory and why he was the way he was, because in the 1991 show, it's really funny because he's real cold. He's not as nice as the 1966 show, he's cold at first and he kind of grows on the family, and then he like loves them. And this Barnabas in 1991 was very self-serving, very angry all the time, and would beat up his servant that he acquires. And and it was really, I don't know why I didn't want. That's why I was like, I wasn't like really romantically it was a weird crush. I don't know how to describe it. An infatuation, and I guess in a way too.
Infatuation, this is someone completely probably different than anyone you had ever seen before, but also the protection thing comes into play. I think with a lot of crushes, especially like you said, you mentioned you have a lot of friends, so that could have like played into it too.
Yes.
Checked you out school and everything. I think you mentioned forced crush. We actually had someone on who came with a counterfeit crush. They're queer, but kind of didn't realize as a kid, because that wasn't a term around at the time, but they knew when they were like, I don't really like girl or boys or girl, so it was like she pretended to like Jonathan Taylor Thomas.
Yeah, that sounds about right. That's around the same era, a little bit later, but yeah.
I was like, yeah, if you're gonna pick one, that's like totally believable. You're swept under you're just like, yeah, everyone likes them, So.
Yeah, it's a safe one. Like I remember there was this kid in school who I knew he was gay. I just knew it, and I was like, that kid is gay. And I told one of my friends that, and they got very defensive, and they were like, he's not gay, he likes Sandra Bullock. And I was like, and I knew that code, and I was like, oh yeah, he's gay.
Sandra Bullock.
Yeah.
Was this like same age?
No.
Okay.
She was, was a celebrity.
No, like at the time, were you also like 4th, 5th grade?
Oh no. This was like in high school.
Oh, okay. Oh,
yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah, this guy was a senior in high school, and I was like a sophomore. And then later on, he he came out of the closet after high school. So it was just really funny. I was like, I knew it.
So anytime you hear Sandra Bullock, you probably like go back to that little memory. I would. So, and I'm sure you probably had some crushes since Barnabas Collins came into your life, but what made him stand out is kind of the one you wanted to talk about today, the one that made an impression the most. You said probably one of the first crushes you ever had.
And that's really wise because it was pretty much the first, and I've always, and ever since then I've always had a thing for vampires. Not long before that, I remember I kind of liked this vampire, but this is the first one that really got me, was Barnabas Collins. There was one from a movie before that I'd seen. It was called My Best Friend's a Vampire, and this kid who becomes a vampire. It's kind of comical, and I liked him for a little while, but it was really Barnabas Collins was it. That was the one. That was the backstory that had the drama. It had everything I was looking for. And
Whole package.
yeah, the whole package. And I loved it. I loved it so much. It was so great. And then later on, we got shows like Buffy, of course, and that wasn't as much about a vampire, but more about the Slayer. But later on we get the Vampire Diaries, which feels really close to like a more modern Dark Shadows. It has a lot of that kind of same appeal to it, especially in the beginning. And so if you're looking for something new to watch, yeah, totally watch either one of those. They kind of measure up to each other, I think.
And you mentioned before, before we actually talked, that Barnabas was this like tortured soul kind of character, which is a trope that's been placed on vampires for a long time since then. You mentioned the Vampire Diaries. I always think of Klaus from the originals because that was more my speed. That's my crush.
Oh,
But-
Joseph Morgan, yeah.
Oh, so good, gorgeous. But for you, how do you think being attracted to a character like this, a man like this, impacted who you found attractive as you got older? Were you always searching for someone you could possibly fix that was a little more cold?
No, I think it was very I don't want to say like indicative of daddy issues. I'm just gonna be honest, sometimes, especially guys, we don't get that affection from our fathers as much, and so you see somebody all cold, and and that's who you kind of view as like your father figure. You know what I'm saying? It's kind of like searching for something from somebody type of thing. I don't know if that makes sense at all, but it's psychologically speaking.
Well, I also think of those kinds of characters as the bad boys, and I think that comes up a lot, especially with crushes. We've had Lala Loves and her book crush, Melissa Sercha and a TV crush, Paige Lavoie and her villain crush. They found them so endearing, but they thought they could be the one to make them not so cold and everything. Did you ever think that, growing up, maybe I could have been the one? Barnabas's turn that guy
I
around.
could have changed, I could have made things a lot better for him.
Yeah.
I mean, I've always, everybody has musings, you know what I mean? You always think, okay, well, what if, I never thought, any further than that, just a little bit of he'll warm up to me. He'll be nicer to me than everybody else.
Well, it would have protected
You know what I mean?
you.
Like that. I'm gonna be different. I'm gonna be the one. Yeah, I see what you're saying, but
Yeah, it comes up so much with when it's kind of justifying why you like the bad boy, because you're like, well, I'm gonna change him, of course.
a little. You wanted to keep that edge, though. You always want that. You just want him to change for you, but have that
Yeah.
edge around everybody else.
Mhm.
But you really don't want that, kids.
No,
That's
it's
not what
very
we want.
confusing.
It's very.
Do you watch The Boys?
No, I haven't watched The Boys actually.
When you watch it, you'll know who my guy is. Homelander, I can change him. But you also said the overall story of Barnabas was something that you found really interesting because of the way he became a vampire. It's not every day they're cursed. It's always a bite, a bloodline, something like that. Have you, in your 30 years since, and taking in pop culture, found anything similar to that kind of storyline? Hotel Transylvania? I don't know. I've never seen it.
Well, I mean, I think there's a curse, but I'm not. It's more it was the first time I've seen that, and I didn't see anything for a long time. I don't know about now. I guess, yeah, in the Vampire Diaries and the originals, you learn about the curse that made the vampires. So the original vampire family, and so there's the curse right there. But that's probably the first time since Dark Shadows, and I loved that. I loved that it was all about a jealous woman he had an affair with, and then his betrothed came to town from Paris, and the woman he had an affair with was actually her handmaid, and she turns out to be a witch. When he's like rejecting her, he's like, no, I'm going to be with Josette now. And so she gets mad and basically curses Josette to fall in love with his brother. And then he ends up getting when he gets mad at her because he figures out what she did. She curses him. She says, we can be together now, kind of thing, right? And he's like, no. And so she curses him, and then a vampire bat flies in through the window and bites him. And that's how he becomes a vampire. And he kills her, but then her spirit basically haunts him throughout the centuries.
This was dark for a 10-year-old.
Yeah, it was pretty awesome.
And this was back in 1991, and I always think, like, pre-internet, having a crush on like anybody you see on TV or in a movie, it was hard because we couldn't instantly go to the like Google and look them up. So how were you like keeping the crush sort of alive? Did you record the miniseries maybe on a VCR and just watch it over and over?
No, actually, I didn't do that because I should have started doing that. But what's funny is that one of the episodes was preempted, and then I didn't get to see it. So I ended up, or live. I've seen it since, but it only had 12 episodes, and so it got preempted because of the Gulf War, and then I don't think they played it, or that they played it at a way different time, and I didn't know about it. So I ended up. I think it was way later in the late 90s is when I finally found out they were selling it on VHS. And it was individual episodes. So you had to pay for like $19.99 per each episode.
Oh my God. That's an investment.
I know. I got like 6 of them, the first 6. And then I was like, I can't afford this anymore.
Have they released it on DVD since?
Yes, they have.
Okay.
They've released it on DVD. It used to be on Hulu in the States for the longest time, but now I can't. I just tried to look it up actually, and I can't find it anywhere. But I did find on YouTube that there was a playlist of all the episodes. You just had to watch some ads along with it, so it was free with ads. So if you want to find it on YouTube, that's where it would be.
That's kind of nostalgic though, because you had commercials back in the day. So.
Well, yeah, but I doubt they're gonna be the late,
yeah,
the earlier commercials.
Wouldn't that be wonderful? I always say, like, when they put shows on streaming, anywhere that else gonna have ads, they should be like the '90s ads. If it's like an old show, it'd be so fun.
And if they had like new product, like for McDonald's and for established brands, Pepsi and Coke and stuff, like all their old ads from that era, and anybody new had to like make something that looked, looked like it was old at least, that would be kind of cool. So that way it would be easily you're just transported back through time.
Yeah. Oh, yes, all those like old toy commercials.
Yeah.
So, and you mentioned, of course, this is a miniseries based on a 1960s series by the same name. When you did get a chance to watch the 1960s original version, did you still find yourself attracted to the character, or was it like Ben Cross's portrayal in the 90s version that was like the one?
It was the Ben Cross portrayal. I was not like, he actually looked more the part to me. Like when I look back at the story, because Barnabas is supposed to be like technically in his 20s. Now Ben Cross was in his 30s, but the guy who played Barnabas, Jonathan Frid, was like in his 40s. And I was like, yeah, I don't buy that he's in his 20s. You know what I mean? And like, how long was he single? For a long time before he was going to get married to Josette. And it's the same premise. Of course, the old 60s soap opera went a lot further, and they did a lot of different things. They had like a Dorian Gray type thing where the guy who was the Dorian Gray character ended up becoming a werewolf, and it was just so crazy. I don't know. There was a Frankenstein type storyline, and then more witch storylines. It got crazy on the original Dark Shadows.
And what did you think of Johnny Depp's portrayal of Barnabas in the movie version?
Hated it so much. It makes me so mad because he talked about how he was such a fan of the original Dark Shadows and how he wanted to pay homage to it, and then he made it into a comedy. And a purposeful comedy. Like, you could probably laugh at some of the things in the original soap opera Dark Shadows, right? Because it was filmed. So a lot of people don't know this, and I learned this from a friend. They only had like an hour to film and record
Oh.
every day. That's it. So they filmed it, like they had to do it live, and the next day or two it would be edited, ready to go, and they would air it, that kind of thing. And so the thing was, the only reason they had like an hour or so was because the film was actually down the street. It wasn't even in the same building.
Oh.
So they had to like reserve time for it to be recorded. And so they would have like, you would see boom mics come into the, frame all the time. All of a sudden you would they would be in a grave and you just see like this, like random crew person hiding behind a headstone and, stupid stuff like that. The camera might zoom in a little too close to their faces. And they're like, you're in my face. Like they had to not break character at all. And they would forget lines left and right. And then somebody would have to pick it up for them. It was so crazy. It was fun to watch though. That's what made it kind of campy, because things like that messed up, but you still got into the story, And so when they did the movie, it just makes me so mad because, okay, of course they gave it the Tim Burton, everybody's pale, everybody's got hollowed eyes, right? They changed the family. The family in the show was all prominent still. They still had good wealth. They still had good standing in the town. People respected them. And in the movie, they made it to where they were washed out. Nobody liked them. Their business was going under. All this bad stuff was happening to the family. It's been cursed for centuries, right? So that's what happens. Apparently Angelique, the witch, not only curses him, but curses his family in the movie. And so it's just and then they changed the characters to be all, I'm like, why are you trying to make them dark? And just make them who they were in the show. If you're really they changed too much. It just made me so mad. They changed the whole feeling, and it just wasn't good.
Well, I don't want to ruffle any more feathers, but if they were going to redo it, but do it right, is there any current actor you could see taking on Barnabas and doing it finally the way you saw when Ben Cross did it?
Well, if we're going to go with somebody, I'm going to say somebody in their 30s or their, I'm just going to do the same thing, 30s or 40s or whatever. And I would say somebody and this is really off the top of my head, Theo James. He was from the Divergent movies. He was currently on The White Lotus. Somebody like him I could see being Barnabas, just because I just think he's kind of hot. But but also I wouldn't want to pull anybody from the Vampire Diaries, but I don't want to pull somebody who's already been a vampire. It just feels cheap, you know what I mean? So it could be,
you want to be known as two. I think if you have to have one type of character you're known for, you have to be one vampire.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to be the vampire guy, and I'm always different vampires. No one wants that.
What a typecast.
I know, so basically somebody unknown would probably be best, I think.
Okay. And so you're really into TV, so maybe you might know this, because I was curious to know why in the 60s they had these 3 very macabre series, because the Munsters and Addams Family aired exactly around the same time, and when they went off the air, Dark Shadows stepped in and ran for 5 more years. So why do you think the 60s was like that? I know it was very counterculture was starting. Maybe that was it. I'm not sure.
Well, so the late 60s, if I'm not wrong, isn't that when the Vietnam War was going on in the late 60s? I think I'm trying to.
Not sure.
I'm looking it up right now because now I want to know when it was, and it started. Ooh, goodness! It went through 1975 for them, but we got into it probably in the late 60s. That's what it was. So I think what I've read once that a lot of fantasy and horror gets really big in times of political strife and war. So we're starting to see that now. If you look at it, there's a lot of more horror coming back into play. There's more fantasy type things. You see all these Game of Thrones, all these Lord of the Rings shows, Star Wars, Marvel, all that is really big right now because there's people are looking for fantasy. They want to leave this world kind of thing. You know what I mean? They don't want to be in the modern real world, or if they're gonna be in the modern world, it's not gonna be anything that's what they're a part of, right? So that's I think that's why, because around that time you had all that political strife and stuff with the war and people getting drafted, and it was kind of like hey, look over here, here's something fun, and that just blew up. That's why.
Very interesting. I got a little education. Now I gotta see if there's any books about this or anything at the local library. Probably not. We have like a really little library, but I will try. But let's get back to Barnabas, because like many crushes, the feelings started to settle down, and he was probably replaced by new crushes over time. But you said you're still very fond of him. He has a place in your heart. Would you say this character is kind of in your Mount Rushmore of crushes, like the most important to you?
Yeah, I would say as far as like, my character crushes, yes. He's kind of the gold standard if you think about it. He's who I hold everybody up to, all my non-existent fictional boyfriends. And
I mean, yeah, I think it happens. Mine is Robin Hood, Disney's version.
oh yeah, he's like, I'm not into foxes, okay? It's just him.
Don't see other ones and be like, ooh, like Fantastic Mr. Fox didn't do it for me. But so, what other three do you think would be in your Mount Rushmore of TV character crushes?
Oh my goodness. So you say Klaus. I'm gonna say Elijah.
Okay.
I loved me some Elijah. My mom and I both loved Elijah, and yeah, we just like how he's always so put together and so calm, and I found it very reassuring. I felt like maybe he could have cracked a smile a few more times, but still, for the most part, yeah.
He was stressed. He had to deal with Klaus all the time.
Yeah, he had a lot to put up with, so I could forgive him for that. So yeah, my third one, I would say, did I say two already? I said Elijah.
And Elijah.
Barnabas, Elijah. So, okay. Wow. I have a really hard time thinking sometimes about these things because I want to like say everybody, but they're not all vampires, like
we started vampire heavy.
Yeah, I'm not just into undead guys, okay? Sometimes they can have a pulse. Anyway, Tom Ellis, Lucifer from Lucifer. Like that character of Lucifer, not like the devil, like we all know as Lucifer. Like this cool Lucifer, the one who's who has a good heart of gold. I liked him. I thought he was really cool, and I'm always into dark-haired guys. I think for the most part, it's usually who I'm into. Oh, except for like Eric Northman from True Blood. He was also another vampire. Alexander Skarsgård.
Oh, okay, yeah, he's good.
Yes, we love him. We love him. Of course, like Christopher Maloney, but that's just Christopher Maloney. That's not just his characters.
Yeah. I think he's like a worldwide crush.
Yeah, he's just kind of like, everybody likes that.
So you would have 3 vampires and Lucifer?
That's so bad.
Sounds right. We always end our crush portion with our imaginations. So if you were a lot older in 1991 and could be in the world of Dark Shadows and be with Barnabas Collins, what do you think your lives would be like?
Oh no, I don't think he swings my way, but he would probably try to get me to be his manservant or whatever. His name is Willie. He was like a groundskeeper at the house, and then he basically went to work for Barnabas because Barnabas kind of bullied him and like enthralled him a little bit. I don't know how you would say it. But I would probably just have to be a mysterious person that moves into the Collins mansion, and they always had somebody moving in. Like they have a governess, they have like this in the original series, so it would probably happen out that way too. Just random like, oh, okay, you're gonna help us do this thing. Well, come stay in our mansion for weeks on end. Like it was really funny. And I'm like, okay, I'll just live there. And you basically get to order around the servants and stuff. Like they're like, you don't live here, man.
So I thought they were like taking in people to pay rent. It's like, are they boarders?
Yeah, I would probably just be like, hey, Barnabas, I know you're a vampire. Don't worry, I ain't gonna tell nobody. We'll keep it on the DL, and let's just hang out. Let's just see where things go.
Well, in this natural progression, just hanging out. So we talked about Barnabas, so we're gonna talk more about what you have going on, and we're gonna talk about the Rewatch Recap, which is a show you kicked off last summer, and like I said, it was with Scream.
Hmm.
With a show like this, you can really start anywhere. So, or like a franchise. Why did you go with the TV series? You know?
Well, because there's so many. I noticed a lot of people who, especially who I followed and who followed me back and whatnot, podcasters. You know how it is on Twitter, especially. You end up following a lot of podcasters if you're a podcaster, and I saw that there was a lot of movie like review podcasts, and there have been some TV podcasts, but they're usually centered around one show.
Yeah.
There's a couple that do like several in one episode, but no one was doing like a full season of a show at random and then go into another show. You know what I mean? Like they were either doing a full series or they were doing just one small episode dedicated to a show type of thing. But no one was doing like one season and then moving on. I think that it was dude, like I just kind of like to feel it out. Like I want to relive this first season of this show or this second season of this show. Now, so far I've only done first seasons, which I'm going to get to later more. But I thought it just wasn't something that you normally saw.
You want to stand out.
Yeah, and I wanted it to be stuff that I had already watched and I had already enjoyed.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to make sure that I was okay. Let's see if it still holds up for me, if I still enjoy it as much, or if I'm kind of like, oh, you know what, I'm over this now, or I criticize the characters a little bit more, and because you start to remember, especially if it's something you haven't seen in a while, and you start to remember things as you're watching, and you're like, oh my gosh, like I can't, and you start to see things that you didn't see before. So I thought that was really fun too.
Mm-hmm. Because nowadays you just don't sit down and rewatch it right away, like because there's so much content out there. So I think with TV shows you definitely have to go back for a rewatch because you're like,
Exactly.
and they take so long to come out now. So you're like, maybe
I know.
How do you think the first season of Scream compared to the film franchise?
Well, I mean, of course, the film franchise is better, of course, and the show Scream ended up being more like it really felt very Fear Street like as far as how the Fear Street books are.
Mm-hmm.
And it was very just kind of like neighborhood, like suburban gothic, that kind of feel, something's not safe in this nice suburban neighborhood, that kind of thing. And so you get like a stalker that's stalking people, and it's not the same Scream that you would see on the movies. It's completely different. There's a story behind this mask that looks vaguely like Ghostface, but it's not. And it's still got the long mouth, that kind of thing. And it turns out the guy who had it was like deformed, and that was like one of his medical masks. And so that's why the killer wears that mask, and there's a whole thing to it, and it has a decent story. Now the first season doesn't execute it as well as you would want, but I remember season 2 got a lot better. But since everybody had like jumped ship after season 1 because they didn't like it, a lot of people did, people didn't come back for season 2, so they discontinued that story, which really ticks us off because you never found out like who the final killer was, kind of thing.
I hate that. We're
Yeah.
just like, can you just release a tweet or maybe the script? Let us know what's going on. I hate that.
Exactly.
You also covered My So-Called Life, which, as much as I love the 90s and teen shows, this is one I've never watched. However, I do know that it houses one of the top tier crushes of the 90s, and that's Jordan Catalano.
Yes.
And he's another character that has that tormented soul thing going on. Having rewatched and recapped, do you see any similarities between Jordan Catalano and Barnabas Collins?
Oh no, I do not at all. I have never been attracted to Jared Leto or Jordan Catalano. That has never been my jam. I never got it. I never got it. Something about his eyes are just too big for me. They're just, I don't know. It's an aesthetic thing. I don't know. It's probably what that is.
They're too big?
Yeah, he's just got too big of eyes. Like if you look at Jared Leto's eyes, they're huge, man. And they're always like, if he has them open, it looks like he's like a deer in headlights all the time. It's crazy.
I'm gonna Google him. He said he looks kind of like those lemurs. That's what I'm gonna imagine when I see him. Or the things from lemurs, Madagascar, the little monkey things.
Oh my god. Okay, you said that, not me. But
Those are
yeah.
too weird. Creepy looking. I mean, I don't like them, but did that show hold up though? Should I give it a chance?
Oh my God, yes.
Okay.
It holds up. You just got to know it's the 90s. It's just a different era. No one had phones. No one, you could go out and you can get away with a lot more stuff, especially with your parents, how they're concerned. So if you can watch Stranger Things, you can watch My So-Called Life. And it's very good. It's true to life. It feels like you're actually a part of, you're watching somebody's life happen in a way, not like reality TV show, but like it's very, very well scripted. You know what I mean? Like the stories they tell, they're kind of, each episode's kind of standalone, even while there's a kind of underlying arc going on. And most of them are standalone, and it gets arcy a little bit later on, but it's really good. And that's why everybody gets disappointed, because it leaves off at a cliffhanger in the first season. It was only one season long, 19 episodes. And so what we did was, or what I did was, I went back, and there was a book that an author wrote about the first season. And then so a few years later in 1999 came out with a second book called My So-Called Life Goes On, and continued the story. So with help from some of the writers and the creator, like with suggestions and whatnot. So it's a little more official. So I ended up reading that and recapping the entire book on an episode. So people, if you felt a little more closure, hopefully, I don't know, but yeah.
I have never heard about this book. As much as I hear about My So-Called Life being like, one of the most like, oh my God, I can't believe they canceled it shows, I don't hear a lot of people then backing that up with, well, you could have read a book that like kind of gives you some closure.
Yeah, I mean,
Googling.
I mean, it still kind of leaves off in a little bit of a cliffhanger, but it feels a little better in my opinion, as far as like, the first time I read it, I remember going, and the second time, this time, it was a little bit better. It wasn't as bad. I accepted it a little bit more, I guess. But yeah, a lot of people didn't know about the book, so that was another reason why I read it. And it's not readily available. It's very expensive if you try to look it up on eBay.
From this, your Dark Shadows DVDs, you're just like all for the very hard to find.
I know. Yeah, a lot of the times though, like the DVDs and whatnot, I bought them as they came out, so I only got it for like $15. So now they're like 100 something.
Ooh, inflation.
Yeah.
But this year, you're going to be focusing on 2 new shows. You have The Magicians and Coupling. These are not shows you hear about a lot. They're not
Exactly.
on everyone's tongue. What made you like land on these 2?
Well, I talked about over with a couple of people, and especially Orlean, who did the series with me. She was kind of she's a little reluctant to do Scream season 2, so we might do it one day, but we don't know. But I said, well, we do something. We need to do something we've both watched, and I just kind of threw out The Magicians, and she said, "Oh yes," because we had both read the first 2 books of the trilogy of books. We never read the third book, and we both have watched the show already. So we thought, yeah, this is perfect. We really like it. We like the show especially, but we're going back and we're going through it with a little bit more of a nitpick, a little bit of a watchful eye, just kind of examining all the characters and why they're all crappy people. And it's been fun so far, and that's coming up. Yeah, that's coming up in April. And after that, I'm doing Coupling, because I liked Coupling. I wanted to do a sitcom because I hadn't known many shows that have done sitcoms, and I wanted to do a sitcom, but not one that a lot of people have done, and something that was short. And I mean, season 1 of Coupling's only 6 episodes, so I figured, why not? And my friend Shelly from Tales of Point Horror Book Club on Instagram, she is from England, and so I figured, hey, let's do the British sitcom with my British friend. So I thought it'd be fun coming up.
And I noticed like Scream pretty recent, My So-Called Life a little old school. It seems like you're doing that again, Coupling a little bit older than The Magicians. Is that kind of how you wanted to balance it out?
Yeah, I like stuff. I mean, it's going to be mostly stuff from my timeline, but I'm trying to keep up with things that some of it's been a little more recent. It's a little easier to access on streaming, especially. Like I said, I would have done Dark Shadows, but no one can watch it unless you're watching in this one YouTube thing, and if you have access to that, I don't know,
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't want to risk it. I wanted to be a little more readily available. So that's another reason how I pick shows. I want to make sure people can reach them if they want to, or just like the TV movies, if there was an access to it somewhere. Like a lot of these you can watch, they're streaming with like commercials on like Freevee or Tubi or something. But then they're also on YouTube. So there's multiple ways to access them, which is what I like. Otherwise, I would go after stuff that's a little more discontinued, you know.
Would you ever do like an animated series? Maybe not like The Simpsons or something, but more like Gummy Bears or something, because they did follow kind of storylines back in the day.
Yeah, I was thinking about that, and there's, I'm thinking about doing some like blocks of things, especially maybe later on this year. Like, I had a thought that maybe I could do SNCC shows and do back-to-back episodes, because they're all like half-hour shows, so we would recap those really quick, and I would just have two in an episode. So I might do a mixed pairing of things, and you had Nicktoons that were also during SNCC. I thought maybe we could do some Nicktoons and just random episodes. I thought that might be kind of fun.
That would be fun. Me on Writer's Bagel Basket, he did an episode with SNCC, and we each picked two, just shows from the lineup and that weren't different. And so we did that. It was really fun. I did Clarissa and Rugrats, and he did Are You Afraid of the Dark and Pete and Pete.
Okay, yes, I love that.
It was really fun to do. So I think that's a good idea, because SNCC, I feel like people don't talk about it enough. It's kind of like everyone's
it went away.
TGIF,
it's like, yeah.
And gotta give the Saturday night guys some woo. Give them some love too. So I want to wrap this up with getting to know you better through TV questions.
Okay.
So I want to know what TV show initially got you hooked on the small screen.
Oh my God. Well, I don't know if I can say that, because I've always had the TV on. Like, earliest memories are like, my family was a TV family. I don't know what it was. They should have made us a Nielsen family, and it makes me so mad they never put one of those boxes in my house. It really does. I really wanted to control what people watch so bad. So like, no, you would love this. You need to watch this. I'm gonna make my Nielsen ratings go up on this show. But they never came to us. So anyway, so yeah, my goodness, it was always, for the longest time, I've been a TV person. I grew up with Nick at Night. I grew up with all these old, of course, old school Nickelodeon, Today's Special, Sesame Street on PBS, but we also had HBO and whatnot. I can remember seeing at age 3, the scene with Johnny Depp getting sucked into the bed from Nightmare on Elm Street. And it's scaring the crap out of me. So that's always been a scarred into my, just right. I didn't want to see that ever again. So I've always been anti Freddy Krueger ever since. Yeah. So I can't really go back to why I started watching. I just know the TV was always on. It was just always on. So it's always kind of part of my life,
Mm-hmm. You mentioned Nick at Night, which is something I also enjoyed. I liked when they did the summer block, so it'd be Mary Tyler Moore Monday and I Love Lucy Tuesday.
Yeah,
that was my jam. I love Summer Vacation only for that reason, because I was a nerd, so I like school. But I don't think, especially because we have so much streaming now, and it seems like kids today don't want to know the TV that came before. They just want to know what's trending and popular now. Do you see that at all? Notice that?
Yeah, I agree with that, because less and less people are having cable or using cable or just watching what's on. And a lot of people just, I'm glad my mom introduced me to a lot of her stuff. We watched a lot of AMC, which used to be Turner Classic Movies. It's not like it is now. And they used to have all the old black and white movies and whatnot, and I hated it when I was a kid. I was like, it needs color,
Yeah.
I don't like it, it's not in color. And as I got older, and the more I watched stuff for the things she made me watch, I appreciated it a little bit more for the stories and the performances, and and you can take a, all right, well, suspension of disbelief for certain things, obviously. Just like when I was watching old Dark Shadows, it's you have to, don't look at the boom mic, watch out for that guy, somebody trips or forgets a line, and you just kind of laugh at it, but you just let it happen, and I wish more kids did that. I wish more parents would introduce their kids to things that were older, not just TV, music and whatnot, and they're discovering it from, which is great that they're discovering from stuff from Stranger Things or what, the Yellow Jackets that show on Showtime. And then other shows like that kind of, that show you past things, and then they're like, oh, I like that song, where's it from, who does it, like, well, that's from the 80s.
From the
And
1900s, as they like to say.
exactly. And I was talking to Orlean about this, but people, kids are, or maybe it was Orlean, may have been Kay, I'm not sure, but people are rediscovering the flip phone.
Oh,
And now kids are getting into flip phones. I'm like,
God.
really?
Stop. You don't want to go down that road.
I don't want to go backwards, please. I mean, I loved my Motorola Razr, but
Ooh.
yeah, that thing was awesome. I loved it. It was all titanium looking.
Yeah, they look so cool. They look like Transformers.
Exactly, they did. Yeah, it was neat.
Yeah, I wish the kids would really appreciate the older things, because I mean, that's why I love the 70s music. I like 70s sitcoms. It's all because of Nick at Night and having VH1. And there's nothing else on. So.
Oh, and TBS too. TBS had like Gilligan's Island and Brady Bunch, and they had other things too. But yeah, old school Batman was on Nick at Night for the longest time.
That one I would skip.
No, it was on Family Channel.
Oh, it became like ABC Family.
Yeah, well, it became Fox Family, then it became ABC Family. Yeah.
Yeah, I would skip that one. That one was a little too kooky for me. I was like, but I was like obsessed with all the rest of them. So now we're gonna talk about a character death from TV that you'll never get over.
There's so many. Like, I just like, no, why? Well, there's some I kind of celebrate, like looking at Marissa Cooper from the OC. You're just like, oh, thank God, got her off that show, and it's a little too late. But whatever. But I guess almost every dang death that happened on the Vampire Diaries, like every single, I just don't get over them. Like all the ones, especially the permanent ones. Like Klaus and like Elijah. I'm like, why couldn't you have just written them to be just going off into the sunset and being fine? Why did you have to kill them? Like stuff like that.
Making sense with my fantasy.
Yeah, why are you ruining this for us?
It feels personal.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you ever watched Legacies, but you didn't?
No.
Well, Klaus makes an appearance on Legacies and sees Hope for one more time. Somebody's able to get to him in heaven, kind of thing. It got really wild. Yeah. There's a whole thing. Yeah. Just Legacies is crazy. Legacies is like Vampire Diaries on crack, and it wants to be vampire. It wants to be Buffy the Vampire Slayer in like the kooky Monster of the Week stuff. And it's a little more comical. It's like a funnier Vampire Diaries.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Look, I dropped off of originals because they moved it to Friday, and I would get I just lose track of the weekend, and then that show, it's like you miss like a week or two, and there's like 700 new characters, and then this guy, and you're just like, I can't catch up. Because
they always had twists, and you're like, oh my God, every week. It was great.
It's too much. So now let's go with, what show do you think delivered the best ensemble cast?
Ooh, there's so many. I mean, there's so many memorable ones. Like, oh wow, like the first ones that popped in my head, obviously, because we just talking about it, Vampire Diaries, a great ensemble cast. And then the next thing that popped in my head was Aaron Spelling shows like 90210 Melrose Place.
Very true.
They had some great, like, crazy people on those shows, good people who could play some, good vampy type people. But that's to be said a lot about soapy type shows. So oh wow, great ensemble cast. Wow. Who's somebody you would say? Let me just see if I can agree with you.
I love Frasier. I love The Office.
Okay, yeah.
I think It's Always Sunny, even though it's a small. I think they're perfect together. New Girl.
What I'm going to say? I'm going to go with Friends, because of, I know a lot of people hate Friends and whatnot. They might not like the comedy, or they don't like how misogynistic it can be at times, or homophobic, and all that stuff. But I liked it, and I still watch it almost every night. I stream it every night almost. I alternate with other shows, but it still holds up for me. And they were all, if it was any other cast, or any one of those cast members wasn't the same person, you know what I mean? If they had to recast to somebody else, it just wouldn't have worked, I don't think, as well. There would have been something off, and I think there was a big magic with that group, and I think that's why I think they're one of the best ensembles.
And our last one, obviously, is what show has your favorite series finale?
Oh, there've been some good ones. Buffy had a great one. Buffy had a really good one. It still felt like it was rushed for some reason to me. Every time I watched it, everybody loves the Buffy one, but I like how it ended. I just hate the feeling of it. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Like the feeling of how it got there. Some really good. I would say again, I would go back to the OC. I really like the way that just pops in my head right now. It had a good ending for how they had to rush to get to it because they got canceled.
Mm-hmm.
So they had a shortened season, and I liked how they wrapped it all up. I don't know if you watched it all the way through, did you?
I was into it until Marissa died. I didn't like Mini Coop, so I kind of fell off. And then I had a concert the night that the series finale aired, and we were in college and didn't have a VCR to tape it, so I didn't see it until maybe several years ago, how it ended.
I liked the last season. A lot of people I really liked it. I felt like it kind of went back to the more humorous way the OC was, and a little less. It was, it wasn't as dramatic, and it was really fun. It started off dramatic, but they got into comedy as it went on, and I liked how they brought it back around at the end where Ryan is the one who finds the kid who might need help. You know what I mean? It's like passing it on, which I thought was really cool. And it was might be a neat way to like bring it back if they ever wanted to do that whole scenario again. They can do it from that point of view.
I could see that. I could see Fox trying to reboot it.
Yeah, anybody actually.
Yeah, I mean, everybody's down for a reboot nowadays, right?
Why not?
Why not toss your hat in the ring?
Just do it.
See, I like the OC finale, and interesting. And the Buffy one. To teen shows, teen dramas.
I'm all about the teen shows. And I have a reason for it. The same thing for YA books and stuff, why I read those more, because we've all been a teenager. You know what I mean? And being a teenager is a similar experience all across the board, because we all usually have a guardian or family or whatnot we stay with. And we all stay in the same neighborhood as our friends. We all go to the same schools. We all end up doing the same thing, you know what I mean, in our life. So that's where we have, and it's only when we become adults, and we don't, not all of us go off to college. Not all of us go and work in trades. Not all of us stay in the same area. Some of us move away. You know, we all have different experiences after high school. So when you're a teenager, you're having very similar experiences as most people around you and across the world at that age, you know? So that's why I think I like it more, because it's more universal and easier to connect with on the whole.
I think we have the same brain, because that is exactly why teen TV and YA and all that coming of age stories are my favorite as well.
Good. I'm glad.
Same seas. I'm like, it's always like, yeah, you can take it and interchange like a kid living in the suburbs to a kid living out in the country, but they're going through these same changes and emotions. And like you said, we've all been there. How can you not connect to these stories? They're so good. Oh, that's why Degrassi forever.
And that's the thing. I had never seen Degrassi. I've seen like clips and whatnot, but I didn't grow up with it. It wasn't around in my area. It wasn't a thing. And so when I've gotten older, there's all this, Degrassi this, Degrassi what? And then I found out about the next generation, and then it had already been going on for a few seasons. Like, well, I'm not going to catch up now. And there's a whole other generation before this, and now they have junior high. What is going on? Like, it was too much. So I never jumped into Degrassi.
It's like I came in with like, not the 80s version, obviously the one from the 2000s, and you do get addicted right away to the characters, and you grow up with them, and then you get mad when the new kids come, but it takes about 3 episodes for you to be like, now I care about these kids so much. And it's just a cycle over and over. Like, everyone's like, oh, who's your favorite generation of it? It's like all of them. It's always good.
You know, and that's one thing I would love to watch again, is that show. It was a soapy show on Nickelodeon called 15. Did you ever watch it?
No, I haven't seen or heard of that.
You
one.
didn't? They had some, like, I think like Ryan Reynolds might have been on it as well. And it was a teen show, and it was just like, it was very soapy, like kids backstabbing each other, and one kid was running away from home, and another kid was drinking, and it was, it's very 90210 like, but like a soap opera. They filmed it like on a soapy type set, so it was really fun to watch. You should try to, if they have it anywhere, you should try to find it.
I will be watching it on Amazon Prime for free. I just looked it up.
Oh my gosh, it's on Amazon? Awesome.
That's what it says. Hopefully Google is not lying to me. Oh, I know I didn't watch it. I didn't have Nickelodeon till a little later.
Okay.
And this was not one they had in syndication, or else I probably would have watched it because I watched anything that came on that channel.
There was another show called Welcome Freshmen that was kind of a comedy for, about, freshman kids in high school.
I have to check these. I wish there was like a coming of age streaming service.
There should be.
Oh god, it would get a lot of love from us at least.
Didn't they used to have like a different channel for Teen Nick?
Yeah, Nick. And when I was in college, that's what I watched Degrassi on. That was cool.
They need to have Flashback Teen Nick channel.
They just I don't know why. I mean, Paramount Plus owns Nickelodeon, so come on.
I know. But the thing is, they have like all the episodes of Clarissa Explains It All except for one, and it is my favorite episode.
Oh no, which one?
It's I think it's the last episode of season 2, and I think it's called Too Much TV or something like that, or All TV, or I'm not sure. But she ends up doing like a class science project, and she's going to watch 24 hours of nonstop television and document everything she sees. So she, all the acts of violence and smoking, and how many commercials there are, and how many commercial breaks, and how many types of shows she watched, that kind of thing. And it's kind of interesting. Total TV, that's the name of it. But it's the only one.
I wonder why. It's like it's like having all that but not having the music. It's so upsetting.
Yeah.
I was like, I remember when Nickelodeon few years ago was like, oh, we're gonna have Flashback Friday or whatever, and we're gonna play all that and all this stuff, and then they didn't air the music on that either. I was like,
You're like, no, that's not, nuh-uh.
I was like, you can't show the Spice Girls in a skit and then not show them perform. What is this? being in your mid-20s, wanting to write letters of complaints to Nickelodeon.
It always made me mad though, because it was so very obvious. It was like the Macy's parade where they were obviously lip syncing, like they weren't even really performing. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure. Nickelodeon was like, we can't really risk all that. No pun intended. So, lastly, can you remind people where they can find you and the Rewatch Recap online?
Yeah, like I said, the Rewatch Recap is available anywhere where podcasts are played. If you want to contact me or just look and see what we're doing online, you can find me at the Rewatch Recap on Instagram, and on Twitter and TikTok, I am at Dustin_Holden.
Well, Dustin, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me today about your TV character crush. And everyone, you can find all of that information below. And until next time, as always, keep crushing it.